Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Get that out there. Good evening. You could have just done it out there.
That's where I will.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I'd like to call to order the February 13th, 2019 Select Board meeting to order. No changes to the agenda. Announcements?
Announcements. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. The police department is testing the outdoor warning sirens at 2 Fairgrounds Road, the Nantucket Fire Station at 293 Nantucket Road, and the Sconset Fire Station out at 10 West Sankaty Road on Tuesday, February 26th at noon. And town offices will be closed on Monday, February 18th in observance of President's Day.
Thank you, Greg. Is there any public comment tonight that's not on the agenda? Mr. Tobias?
Hey, Tobias Glidden, 24 Rugged Road. Just not necessarily an announcement for the Board of Selectmen, but kind of a community one. Glidden's Island Seafood is being sold to another fish market on Nantucket to Joan and Jeff Henderson, who've worked out of Bartlett's for years. And so we're going to be having it'll be the first time in over 120 years that Glidden Seafood won't be run by a Glidden. But we're really happy that, they're going to keep the name and run it as a family-run fish market. And they're local people. We really believe in them. And so we'd invite everybody to come this Saturday from like 10 to 5, drink some chowder for free and share a story. So just want to say thank you again for everybody's support over the last 100 years or so. And we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tobias. 120 years. Any other public comment tonight that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, there's no new business that I know of. Is there approval of minutes, payroll warrants, and treasury warrants?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Pending contracts. Any questions or comments from Greg? Or motion?
Motion to approve. Move to second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Citizen Department request. We have the Finance Department request for approval, sale of general obligation bond, anticipation note for sewer.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're asking for the board's concurrence and approval to issue 2 bond anticipation notes totaling $5.4 million for the sewer. One of them, the majority of that, about $5.3 million, relates to the force main failure from last year. We're still working through the insurance, any recapture of insurance money. And when we get that finalized and the finalization of the SRF paperwork, then we'll issue an interim or permanent financing with them. So we need to roll that. And then there's a small amount, about $161,000, which is related to the CMOM program that they have. We were eligible for some CCTV work to be funded through SRF, and that paperwork is in the process of being completed. So we need to roll these notes. We're actually only rolling them to May because we anticipate that all the work will be done by then.
Motion to approve as referenced in the packet and on the screen. Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the next up, is the Nantucket Chamber of Commerce and the Daffodil. There's 2 parts. I'm on the board of the chamber, so I'm going to recuse myself. And Don's going to take over.
Okay. Jim, are you recused too? Okay. Erica, did you have a comment on this?
I did. I just wanted to know that these are pretty much annual asks for the Chamber of Commerce for the Daffodil Parade and Festival. This year they are asking to expand the blocking for the vehicles to a portion of Federal Street between India and, sorry, I'm not using a mouse tonight, so I'm a little... So tonight they're expanding the blocking from Maine to India, so there'll be vehicles here. But this map, I just wanted to explain it a little bit. this section here of Union Street between Salem and Main, this is not going to be for vehicles. This is just to direct traffic here because Main Street's going to be closed. Same thing with here. The chamber, is my understanding, had asked that this be closed, but I have been requested by police and fire to make sure that there is this lane, just a single lane hugging the Toggeries block, so that traffic can go up Orange if needed, and we recommend that.
Okay.
And is that mentioned in this recommendation?
Sorry?
Is that specifically mentioned in here?
It's not, but it's been in some communication back and forth administratively, so I just wanted to be sure that you know how we feel about it.
Okay. I'd make a motion to approve with the additional recommendations from administration being
Second.
added.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That was on A.
Yes.
So B.
Any
No,
comments?
just this is an annual request that has been approved in the past, and we have no issues with that.
No issues last year.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Oh,
Yes.
yes, you may.
And a couple things.
You can pull the mic down, James.
The Union Street spot there, I had considered, and not spoken to anybody yet, but the thought was that that's a really excellent place for the EMT to be. Some years back, we had a heart attack. A guy had a heart attack. Nobody even knew. They were so busy focused taking the cars out of there. And there was a stuck car in the first lane. And it was taken care of. But rather than have the EMT try to slug their way all the way down through the cars, if there were a problem, as we had that day, they'd never be able to get down through there because all of the cars that are in the parade are already parked. They're already below Orange Street. So what we had considered as an alternative would be to have the EMT stationed at that Union Street slug. That's one of the reasons that that's opened up, not only for the traffic detour around it, but also so that it's a really, really easy place to put the crash cart and they can just get right out of there if they run into a problem without any interference from any cars or any parade or anything. So I wish I jumped up before you guys had made your motion, and I apologize for not having done so. I just got here. But the only thing that we would possibly want to revisit and would be happy to talk with you again would be about that strip in front of Murray's. It strikes me as dangerous that we have people moving all around that area all the time, right up at the head of Main Street. That's one of the major spots for the fire truck, the fire truck that takes the kids around and so on and so forth, and out to Wisconsin. And it's a big part of where the traffic flow is to get everybody in and around there at the time that the parade starts to go. So I just kind of always wanted to keep that clear. We ran into the same thing at the Christmas tree lighting where there were a tremendous amount of pedestrians and everybody right up against the tree. And we were able to work out with Jared and everybody that day to have that lane be there until the event began. And then once the event began, that lane was closed off. It necessitated a left turn from Fair Street up and up to the monument. And that was where the problem was first addressed to us, that this is going to be problematic. They worked it out. So just that's all of the information on that one particular thing would be, I just think it would be a better idea to have that closed off for safety and to have the EMTs and emergency vehicles be down there on Union Street where they can just go straight out. That's of any consideration. Thank you.
I think the fire chief is behind you.
Good evening. Just for a point of clarification, we don't station EMTs down here for this event. So any access that we have is going to be off of what we already have access to that's not blocked off. Keeping the top of Main Street is important, not because of the event so much, but we need access for Orange Street in case there's an emergency on Orange Street.
Right.
If we don't have access to Orange Street at the bottom at Main Street, that is going to restrict our ability to respond to anything for a good portion of Orange Street. So we really need to keep that open in order to go through.
Okay. Oh,
Navy chief.
the chamber wonders and
To come to the mic.
wonders and has wondered in the past whether it might not be a good idea to have somebody staged there.
Well,
You know,
I think we need to defer to public safety to work out where they're going to station.
And also, this should be done during the event permitting process, not at this board, to be
well,
quite
I'm
frankly.
I'm just commenting as somebody who's experienced this thing 5 years in a row now, and did have an emergency. That if there had been somebody there, we would have been able to get somebody to the guy about 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, why wasn't this part of the event permit, like even for that discussion? It's a valid point, but why wasn't it?
I mean, I would suggest deferring to public safety on how
I
they want to
agree.
handle things. And I don't think anyone
Yeah, I don't have any problem.
has an appetite to redo our
The
vote.
chief has an excellent point about Murray, and I understand that. I was just saying that I wish that we were able to prevail upon the town to have something down there. There's several thousand people in the area that one day, that one afternoon, and it's a little spooky not to have emergency vehicle close at hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Now back to Sconset and the waiver, the annual waiver.
I'd make
Is
a
there a
motion to
motion?
approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And I just want to make sure Jamie's comments make the record. Yeah, good.
Thanks, Jamie.
Okay, we're going to move over to the town manager's report. Greg, do you want to open with this, or do you want me to?
I'm going to ask you to open with it, actually. It's
Okay,
kind of a unique one.
So we're going to review, it's review and adoption of the hazard mitigation plan. It's a joint meeting with the NPDDC. If you want to, Nat, do you want to go ahead and open your meeting?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And we have 5 members here. We don't have a quorum, so we'll have to call a meeting, including Mr. Fee. It's the 5th. And so thank you for having us.
Okay, thank you. So we have Holly Backus, our land use specialist, and Chuck Larson, and the consultant here, Noah, that's going to walk us through. If anybody is here to, we received emails today, and I received some phone calls about some factual issues of this draft. They're going to address this today, and there's an addendum, and they're going to walk us all through that. So anybody who was maybe a little worried about some of those issues, they're going to be addressed tonight. Holly?
Thank you, Jason. On behalf of the town of Nantucket staff. Yes, ma'am. On behalf of the town of Nantucket staff who have worked on this update, I present our hazard mitigation update. It's been an 18-month process, and we couldn't do it without obviously our consultant, staff, and members of the public. I'm going to introduce Noah, who is from Malone McBroom, who actually worked with Malone McBroom when they did the original plan and has been done the update.
Thank you, Holly. So I'm just going to walk through. We have a few slides just kind of summarizing what a hazard mitigation plan is for those who are not familiar with this idea at this point. Hazard mitigation plan, the goal of hazard mitigation planning is to reduce or eliminate long-term risk to people, property, and resources from natural hazards and their effects. You can kind of break it down into these subcategories. There's also, educating residents and policymakers about these hazards, and then connecting hazard mitigation planning to other community planning efforts is a pretty significant part of what we're trying to do with this plan. And then also enhancing and preserving natural resource systems within the community. Hazard mitigation plans provide comprehensive risk assessment to support proposed strategies, detailed action plan that the community may implement to reduce risk, coordination with local, regional, state, and federal entities. And then these last two are kind of central to it, providing state and FEMA with information to guide emergency response and post-event assistance. And then it makes the town eligible to receive federal grant funds for hazard mitigation projects under FEMA grant programs. In this plan, the hazards that we address are broken into these categories. non-coastal flooding, which includes flooding from streams, ponds, and drainage-related flooding. Separately from that is coastal flooding, referring to storm surge flooding, and then hurricanes and tropical storms. So that's really a high wind risk, shoreline change, including erosion and sea level rise. Summer storms and tornadoes, that's looking at high winds again and lightning, and then winter storms, wildfires, and earthquakes. So, after this, as Holly was saying, this 18-month long process looking at Nantucket's capabilities, hazards, risks, and so on, we've come up with, actually, I don't have the number off the top of my head. We came up with quite a few, many actions. The hazard mitigation plans are designed to be implemented on a 5-year framework. So these are supposed to be focused 5-year plans to be pursued by the town. These are just a few examples that I'll go through right now. These are the top ranked actions that we came up with. Completing the community coastal resilience plan and becoming an MVP community. That one's already almost done. So we're off to a great start. Participating in a limited public-private partnership with Nantucket Engineering and Survey to complete a study of the Fulling Mill Brook watershed, in particular the hydrologic conditions at Pulpus Road, to identify alternatives for improvements to this area. And you can see, among the parts of these actions are which hazards they address, the status of that action right now, who's responsible, what the time frame is, estimated cost, and potential funding sources. So I'm not going to go through any other ones right now, but
No, how many were there total? How many actions?
Sorry.
I'm just curious if it was, because we just saw some of the big ones, right? That
yeah,
in those presentations.
For each of those hazards, there were at least 3, I think. So it came out to a couple dozen, but.
You don't have to give me an exact number. Was it 40 or 100?
I think closer to 40.
Okay, thank you.
About 40.
I think 40 is actually a good
Okay.
estimate. Oh, sorry. Okay, so then the adoption process. So we've you can't really see these, unfortunately, but it's a long process to adopt these plans, and the adoption includes approval by the state and by FEMA. So we've gone through all of that, and at this point we're at step 10 over here. Just have a yeah. So step 9, FEMA reviews the adoption documentation and formals a formal letter of approval, which now once the town has that letter of approval pending adoption. So now once the town adopts, we send it back to FEMA and FEMA approves, and it's officially filed with FEMA. Oh, apparently I need to check each of these one at a time. Okay, so we're down here. Sorry about the funky animations there. So this is what the certificate of adoption will look like. And I believe we have that and ready for signing. Do you want to talk about the...
Yes. So of course, everybody knows that once we have this formal approval from FEMA, we'll be eligible for FEMA funds, which is an excellent thing for the island to have. We haven't been able to utilize those since 2012 when the original document expired. So this is something that we'll be able to utilize. With that said, I will say that the town has definitely been able to utilize state funding through the CZM grants. So we have not done things, but this is another way to implement some other things. So over the next 6 months to a year and through on, staff, as the local coordinator for the town, we're working with the rest of staff to make sure that we implement those strategies. We've already had a couple of meetings to identify who's going to be in charge of what actions and where that funding source is coming from to move forward and make sure we're checking those boxes, if you will. It's going to reach out to other aspects of the town. So we're moving in a good direction. With that said, we are aware there have been some concerns, which rightfully so, and we have reached out to Malone McBroom on some of those changes. And with tonight, they've also given us, thank you, an addendum to the plan. If the board is so inclined, that can be also signed off on, and that would fix some of those facts that have been erroneously put in the update. I will note that there were a concern about the repetitive loss list. Wanted to be on record to let everybody know that the repetitive loss list is something that comes directly from FEMA themselves, not the town of Nantucket. That is something that I actually had to certify with FEMA to get in order to even provide it to our consultant to do the work to begin with. So I will let you know that. However, if you look at the strategies, there is a strategy specifically about the repetitive loss properties. And that's something that obviously will continue, and we will work on to reach out to those employees or those property owners. Sorry, that will be received guidance through MEMA and FEMA on that. As far as these concerns.
Yeah. Sure. So there were a couple of concerns expressed about the erosion control project off of Baxter Road, and that has been corrected. The plan had said that public funds were used, and it's been rephrased to say a public-private partnership. And then it was clarified that this quote is a quote from the Sconset Beach Preservation Fund. And if you scroll down a little bit more, it notes that this plan is not endorsing that specifically. It's just reporting that this is an action that has been performed on the town. The purpose of this statement within the plan is to just show efforts that the town has undertaken or haven't undertaken on the island, and to show what kind of efforts have been done and what kind of capabilities there are, not to specifically suggest this. There's no specific suggestion of an action related to this in the plan. And then this point B, if you keep scrolling down, it's a similar point that actually it's on the next page, that it's clarified that it's not actually that it's not, state of Massachusetts does not consider a geotube to be a hybrid technique. So correcting that aspect. And the reason that we're doing this as an addendum rather than just going into the plan and making these corrections is because of how far we've gotten in this approval process. We cannot make any changes to the plan document itself and still have it be accepted by FEMA. We'd have to start the process over back to the state with the changes. So this way, it allows us to still have the plan go into FEMA and have the town be within the FEMA program so that it can receive funding while still making these changes to the plan.
Yeah. Is this considering the addendum?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm Maureen Phillips. I live at 30 Long Pond, and I'm the author of these various points of error that I sent to everybody today on behalf of the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy and the Nantucket Residents Association. And I appreciate that you guys were able to quickly address them. I really appreciate that. And we really appreciate all the work, Holly, that you and Chuck and everybody have done. This is not easy, not fun, and I know we have to get things done so we can get the grants. But the language as you fixed it here is not correct, and maybe we can work on this. I don't want to, hammer things out or be arguing, but the amendment leaves in saying that the Baxter Road Erosion Control Project uses soft sand-filled geotubes. Well, they're they are coastal erosion structures, which are hard structures, and saying that there's something that they absolutely are not, and that's part of a record, is very concerning to those of us who want to have an accurate and well done scientific look at excuse me, at how we control erosion and what's going to happen with the our coastal resiliency plan and all of that. And so I really think that this needs to be further corrected. I understand that it'll have to be in an addendum. However, I also have a couple of comments about why, I don't know, maybe this draft was out in some other place and the public didn't get a chance to see it, but here we're presented with a fait accompli and it can't be changed. And so that is bothersome to me. And I would think to most other citizens, residents on the island. And also the fact that, and maybe I'm somebody who just didn't realize this, but our plan expired in 2012. Whose job is it to take care of that? Whose job is it to make sure it doesn't expire again? I'd like to know who's I'm not trying to blame anybody, but I'd like to know who's going to be responsible to ensure that we never, ever go without a FEMA, a hazard mitigation plan. So is that a question anybody here can answer?
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yeah.
To answer your question, there was a former employee who actually was here for quite a long time, and he did an excellent job. But through what the case may be, it expired. It is a department town-wide process, so it takes more than just one person. I will say I have been dubbed the local coordinator for this.
I saw that, and God love you.
Thank you. On top of planning board.
Yes, exactly.
But with that said, it's my duty to make sure that we're moving forward. And I can tell you this administration, I can tell you that we have received support on making sure that we move forward in the direction to making sure that we meet all those targets. We make sure that if we don't have, and I'm just to give you this, if we don't have this document approved, there's going to be funding sources that we're not going to be capable of getting to in order to achieve those goals. So if we don't do that, we're going to be back to square one. I really can't speak on behalf of how in 2012 it didn't go anywhere. I didn't get into this position until 2015. And then while that position was leaving, I got put into this. Mostly because I was concerned on a couple of aspects that we needed to get into the plan. So moving forward, we will make sure that we have annual reviews. I can tell you right now, we've already had department-wide with Libby meetings about those actions and how to make sure that we're on target. So we will make sure that even when we get to the point of engaging the public, that you'll be involved.
Holly, I really appreciate that, your response. And really, we are not looking to blame anybody. I just don't want this to happen again. I would guess again, most of the residents on island. And again, I understand this got to be filed. We have no choice. We're stuck. But I'm just saying I don't like being stuck with errors in an important federal filing. I just don't like that. And I'm sorry that's where we are.
Jim?
Could you clarify why this needs to be submitted and approved tonight? What happens if we don't do that?
Absolutely. So we received a grant from MEMA, the state level, in order to accomplish this. We have until this spring, April, in fact, in order to have this formal document approved. If we don't, there's going to be a few ramifications.
So it doesn't need to be approved tonight. Obviously not. So it does not need to be.
We do have.
So I really think that a couple of things. This is such a sensitive issue to our community. The Wisconsin Bluff. It can be something that's has a potential for being even more divisive. So I think whether it's an addendum or I guess addendum's fine, but I think we should pause and take the time to hammer out the details of it. And I'm not trying to wordsmith it, but personally, was concerned when I saw that the reference was made to the sponsor's website, and rather than an organization like Concom or somebody else who may say the same things, but to me but again, I just think, I could not vote in favor of this tonight, this addendum without, and I think we should move forward, and everybody's busy and that's not a problem, I think, but I couldn't vote on this without some changes to the addendum.
Thank you, Jim. Holly, what were you? Do you have anything else?
As long as we can get direction from the board.
So Jim beat me to it. My question is going to, be, could we adopt this addendum next week? Is that enough time to get it out to the public? Because, none of us on the board have read it. The public hasn't read it yet.
We could probably even give 2 more weeks. I mean, that's I don't think is a problem. I don't want to really speak for our consultant, but if that would be beneficial to the public as well as the board to give a little more time, I don't see a problem with that. Again, our biggest thing is making sure that we've got that one thing that needs to be done before FEMA can give us that final approval. This is they want to make sure that the local jurisdiction is ready to adopt.
Don?
We don't have a meeting in 2 weeks, so I think we would have to hammer this out and I think do it next week. So then you have the entire month of March for leeway to make sure that you get your FEMA approval so we don't lose our financing from FEMA.
I think a week's not enough time, so I would go for 3 weeks because I think it, to me.
They still have to submit it to FEMA and get the final approval. No, it has to be complete by April. Am I wrong in that?
I think 3 weeks will be fine.
Oh, it's okay.
Really, we just have to send it back and say it's been signed, and then it's good as soon as they get it.
It's already been approved.
Exactly.
The only thing we need to do is approve what they've approved.
Right. So there should be no kind of lead time between when
3 weeks
you sign it and they're good with it.
So we'll have it on the March 6th agenda, if that's okay, just to have some kind of accountability.
That's fine.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And I guess if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, to respectfully request comments, I guess, by a certain time frame, so that way we can make sure that we can address them accordingly.
No, I'd be happy to do that because, I'm not being an advocate for or against Wisconsin. I'm just trying to be an advocate for getting the facts right. So this might just be fixed by removing some examples. And, we don't have to go through a whole lot of hoo-ha about it. But I'd be happy to work with you on it, just, so we can get it. You guys don't have any more work to do. And I really don't want to, having read most of these 600, well, at least looked at most of these pages, I don't want to look at it again either. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maureen. Judith?
Judith Wagner, 50 Quidnet Road, member of the Planning Board and the NPEDC. Thank you for what you just did. I really think Ms. Phillips was right on everything she said. I have to say to the consultants, I know you've been working on behalf of the town on a number of different things, but I have to say I found this really quite an imperfect document. I don't know what level of care and supervision was given to it, but as a former teacher, it would get an A, might not get a B. And I think that the town should really have expectations that there's submissions done in an effective way that meets the need for plain English and accessibility for the readers. Thank you too. I find it just quite striking to think that someone would put up something without sharing it to the public or anybody, put it in fine print there and expect that people would say, go after it. That's fine without even reading it. I appreciate Holly's work on this. I talked to her about this after the planning board Monday night, and I really appreciate too. I think it'd be very good to have something in writing from the planning department, the director, saying you are the official one. If you were to leave for some reason, there'll be somebody else appointed to oversee it within 30 days of the vacancy of that position or something like that. I'd also like some further clarification of how this fits in with the coastal resiliency work. And I have to say, as a citizen, I understand the complexity of federal, state, local activities, but I find it frankly very distressing to think that FEMA is more concerned to get something, whether it's factually accurate or not, and that the system is set up. So I asked Holly if this was going to be a real hearing where people could speak, and she said, well, it had to be approved tonight. That's not in my mind what a public hearing is. So I thank all of you for your position and care here, but this really shouldn't happen again. So I thank you for
Thank you, Judith.
speak.
Mr. Chair, if I may touch on one thing.
Mhm.
As far as my position as the local coordinator for the town, if you look at the document, I'm not the only point of contact. That Chief Pittman, as the emergency coordinator, as well as Brendan Coakley, both of those gentlemen are involved with this process. So the fact that as a member of the Plus Department, I'm the local coordinator just because it is a grant that NPDC was the one that received. So it just kind of made sense that way. Of course, yes, I can move forward with that if that's okay with the director, but I just want to make that point of clarity that I'm not doing this alone. So.
Okay, thank you.
And Holly, you did say this was going to have an annual review as well, correct?
Absolutely. If you read the document, there's some specific requirements that I'm required to do. So we've already started that. Before you all have given its blessing, we've already looked at those strategic plan action items. We've already figured out, okay, where are these things coming from? Who's responsible? Because that's the biggest thing. I think we need to take a moment and pause at the fact that this whole process came out of the Disaster Act of the year 2000. I say the year 2000, that wasn't that long ago, but then it was year I graduated high school. But at the same time, it was a learning thing. The plan that was previously adopted by the then Board of Selectmen was in 2007. 2007, they only had 7 years at that time. I think the state of Massachusetts was actually working on having this. So this is a kind of like the second go around, if you will, for us at least. Other jurisdictions did not have it lapsed. I don't know how many other jurisdictions did. Nevertheless, we're behind that. We need to move forward this time that we're in with resiliency. That is going to key in to other things, but this is the formal federal document that's going to help us if we have some issues. We are going to be moving forward with incorporating action items within other plans that we already have and other plans that we want to adopt. So,
Thank you.
I was just going to make a motion. If you want.
A few more comments.
Ready?
I'll make a comment after the motion.
Okay. Before you do that, before you make the motion, Chuck, was there anything you wanted to add on? Are you okay?
No, I'm here to support that.
Okay. All right.
So make a motion to continue the adoption till the March 6th meeting. And in the meantime, just to make sure that the addendum addresses every concern with factual issues and errors and omissions,
Second.
so forth.
Any discussion?
Yeah, just more of a quick comment that I thought that the comments that came in from the citizens were very salient, very relevant, and it's a massive document with a lot of time that has gone into it. I think that anyone who can even read one section of it, and if there's something to comment on, those are some of the comments that several readings to get to all of these. So sort of the community participation, I think, is essential, and I really appreciate it.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Jim?
So to that point, this is a question really for the chair or for town administration, but is the development of this plan part of the town's contract with the NP and EDC to provide certain services through Plus?
I don't know the answer to that.
Greg,
Libby's shaking her head no.
No, I wouldn't think it would be. Just not
So
specifically
it's a
written into the MOU.
So it's a town
It's not
administration.
specifically written into the MOU.
So it's a town administration responsibility. So it's
It's been in the planning function. Yeah.
Excuse me.
So
We had this
is
issue with the
part-
housing.
This is part of the problem.
We had this issue with
have-
the housing.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So we have, someone who's done yeoman's work to put together this plan, who it sounds like got put on this project because she was trying very nicely to get a grant. And it's one of these things where kind of who's in charge. So this is what happens when you, these are the things that can happen when you kind of outsource certain town functions to a third party. In this case, the planning office. So I would think we should, this board should consider making clear about who's responsible for these kinds of things. And this is just a whole list of things, not just the hazard mitigation plan. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I might clarify on that, the former person that was involved, Mr. Fonzuto, who was an excellent man, he worked on getting this grant through MEMA before he retired. So this was something that he worked with NPDC, the planning director, to get the same exact process that they did before in order to get the first plan. So I just want to be on the record just to say there wasn't anything I did.
No, I was trying to, I was trying to say that it was nothing you did. So now it seems like before this was under the jurisdiction of the Public Safety Department, if it was Dave Franzuta.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So again, more confusion. So thank you. None of those are questions.
Matt, you had something?
Well, just if I have 3 bosses at work, I have no bosses, and no one is responsible. So the buck has to stop on some of these things with one person, and it has to be shared. So anyway.
Rita?
I think the hazard mitigation plan and coastal resiliency plan are 2 documents that have to keep going, and there does need to be very clear ownership of both of them. The other thing I was wondering if we could answer is there was a question about how this then ties into the coastal resiliency plan, and I'm wondering if someone could comment on that.
So that's certainly language we'll add if it's not already in there. And I do seem to have a memory that there's some explanation how this fits together. FEMA, the federal government, this is a document that's got to follow a checklist of requirements and, serves that purpose, identifying, prioritizing selected projects. The coastal resilience is the way we've started it is building off the state requirements with the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. There's a lot of similarities, but the MVP program is also more broader in terms of community resilience across multiple other areas. But one of the things that we've been doing quite effectively is working together to make sure the 2 plans are in sync. And probably the most important part of this is not the plans, but it's the output, the projects, the next steps, the actions. And so we're going to, work after this to really operationalize moving forward and tracking these and really coordinating grants across departments. So this is essentially a document and documents that are going to drive how we go after projects in the future, how we'll fund them, whether they're capital projects, FEMA grants, state grants, some combination thereof. And this is all new, for Nantucket and, this new program from the state too, for the MVP program.
Yeah, and it looked like there was quite a bit of sort of foundational information that could possibly be used then in the coastal resiliency plan as well. So
we'll take the information from the hazard mitigation plan and where it fits and, can, really reinforce the coastal resilience plan. But I guess the coastal resilience plan is really the larger umbrella plan of which the hazard mitigation is a supporting element. And there are certain requirements like the annual update of the hazard mitigation plan to keep it effective. There's certainly going to be annual updates needed for the coastal resilience plan as well. And all those will be kind of laid out in the next 3 months now through, say, the end of May, because we're going to be coming back with a review of the MVP project workshop report. And then with Malonick McBroom, we're going to provide the coastal resiliency report. And some of that, just the amount of time this has taken is to really coordinate across these different programs and get clarity to know what each one is. But, tonight was trying to focus on the hazard mitigation, but we will do a better job explaining, the different components and how it all works together.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. So we got 3 weeks for a kind of a public review session almost, and then we'll come back with an addendum that's corrected, and then maybe we'll have some clarity on, who owns it, some of the comments tonight. 3 weeks, we can figure that out. And
does this have to be, should this be a public hearing, or is this just an agenda item for our board?
Item.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other comments? Okay. Thank you all. Thank you. Okay, next up is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund report of reuse of the fire station property at 131 Pleasant Street for affordable housing And we also on the agenda have a possible continued discussion of other reuse options. Tucker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and happy birthday. Tucker Holland, housing specialist. So you all will recall a few months ago, the board had asked the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to take a look at the potential use of the old fire station site from the standpoint of might it lend itself toward housing, meeting some of our housing need. And so the trust fund has engaged a highly qualified party, Union Studio, out of Providence, Rhode Island, to help take a look at what conceptually what might be possible at this site. We understand there may be more immediate near-term needs with respect to utilizing the existing structures are there, but this is intended to take a look at what might be possible. And of course, we're happy to take this analysis and study further, should the board like to, coming out of tonight. So with that, I'd like to introduce Douglas Kalfels from Union Studio.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, my name is Douglas Kalfels with Union Studio Architecture and Community Design in Providence, Rhode Island. There I am in living color. I'm the principal and managing partner of the firm. And before we sort of dive into the quick study that we had done to sort of look at the option here, I just wanted to introduce us a little bit because we're sort of a new entity here, and then a little bit about how it was that we were sort of introduced in a way to this discussion, and I'll try to be brief about that. But we were founded in 2001. My partner and I founded this firm really as a community design practice. We both sort of cut our teeth in Boston, New York, working on all manner of large projects, and we really felt like the kind of places where we wanted to make a contribution were in neighborhoods and communities where we, frankly grew up and wanted to see these places thrive again. And so that really became the basis of our practice for the last almost 20 years. We are based in Providence, so we're a little further away. And this is just a smattering of the kinds of things that we have grown into from the neighborhood design work that we continue to do. It's now translated into civic work, libraries and buildings of that type as well, all of which support community design sort of broadly in our opinion. And this is the group of smiling faces that make it all happen. So the reason we got sort of connected to this conversation in some ways has to do with our involvement in the recent past in the sort of discussion about what we call the missing middle. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with this idea, but basically that over the last 50 years or more, we've sort of forgotten many of the sort of tools that have been available in pre-war sort of communities for providing housing options and types and configurations that lend themselves to a broad range of the socioeconomic sort of band of the communities that of a rich community. And this is, we in the last 50 years, things have really allocated more towards single family and large multifamily, and the sort of stuff in between has largely been forgotten about in many cases. And so in the recent past, and I would say in the last 18 months or 2 years or so, we've been engaged with the Cape Cod Commission and have been involved in a whole series of conversations out on the Cape about issues surrounding housing and density, and how do we do this in a way that can support the character of the kinds of communities that we all know and love. And it's from that conversation that we've sort of skipped out and were introduced to Tucker and some folks on Martha's Vineyard as well, because clearly the kinds of pressures that are out on the Cape are even more intense out here on the islands, and we understand that very clearly. These are just some quick examples of some of the kinds of things we've been working on out on the Cape, planning projects all around mixed use and affordable housing in many cases. In the lower right-hand corner is a competition we won recently for the Cape Cod Young Professionals Group for basically providing a prototype for affordable workforce housing, flexible affordable workforce housing. And one of those is being built on the Cape as we speak. These are some other examples of the kinds of work we've been doing. the lower right-hand corner is a 63-unit workforce project in Hyannis. So all of this is just to say that this is sort of a conversation that we've been very engaged with, and I think is incredibly important for many communities, both locally and around the country for sure. So all that being said, we'll now get to the main event and look at the site we've been discussing. So we're all familiar with the site, I believe, at the intersection of Pleasant and Sparks. It's the sort of Flatiron site there at the tip, and it's obviously the place where the current fire station is. So I think we all know that generally well. Here's the site a little bit closer up. And when we began speaking with Tucker, basically we looked at the site. We haven't had a huge amount of time, but we looked at this and said, all right, let's try to understand what our goals are for looking at this conceptually. So we wanted to obviously work with the existing infrastructure that's in place there. There's a sewer line, a force main that cuts diagonally through the site, and another smaller line that comes basically transverse through the site. We wanted to try to meet zoning and code to the greatest extent possible. Our goal was to get around 30 units of housing here, see what that would look like, how that would feel. 10% of that being 3-bedroom units, so 3 of them being 3-bedroom units to meet a family need. Desirable for us to have mixed use, pedestrian friendly, and something architecture certainly that's contextual to the area. So with those thoughts in mind, we took a look at the site. So this is a relatively quick study, but we tried very much to preserve the infrastructure. So here's the force main that comes through sort of diagonally. And then there's another one that comes through here, sort of transverse through the site. So our thought was to configure the buildings on the site in such a way to minimize impact on whatever infrastructure is there. And then we really looked at 2 sort of different building types really for the site. So the first building type is represented by basically everything on this edge. And our thought being that these could all be mixed use types if they need or want to be. But these types really our focus really was studio and 1-bedroom type units. We want to make them affordable to build. So these are basically flats, 1-bedroom flats that are 3 stories up. These are walk-ups, covered walk-up. The first floor, this is just conceptually showing that the first floor of any of these could be commercial, retail, or office space. The elevation that you see up there is just one idea. This is not necessarily a suggestion of what it should be. It's just a suggestion of what it could be. I think there's a lot of work to go if you were ever to pursue something like this. The other building type is a series of townhouses that sit basically in the site of where the fire station is at present. And those would be conventional 3-bedroom townhomes, relatively compact. The idea being that those could not have small yards in the back, and you can see that the parking sort of chicanes its way around that to give these a little bit more of an identity because they're likely to be more family in nature. From a parking standpoint, we were able to accommodate all the parking for the residences here between what is shown sort of in the sort of behind the block parking, through block parking. And then there's a series of on-street parking spaces that could serve the commercial, office, or retail need. And depending upon what that is, obviously that parking demand ebbs and flows. So as currently depicted, given the amount of retail office space that we've shown, we're a little under what would be required for that parking. But again, this is very conceptual in nature. So just very quickly, the first floor, we were imagining that the vast majority of that on the lower level would all be sort of mixed use. So this could be office and commercial retail space. There are a couple of ground floor units to satisfy our accessibility needs, a small community space, and then obviously the ground floor of the townhomes there. And then up above, the flats, the 1-bedroom flats all the way up. This is the second floor. And on the third floor, the scale does drop in a couple of locations, but we take the vast majority of them up to 3 stories. And then just conceptually from a massing standpoint, just to understand the scale of what it is that's being suggested, this is just a quick image rendering. All of these stay within the height limit of the zoning in this area at this stage of the game. So I think it certainly illustrates that given the goals that we set out for ourselves to test the site to see if it is something that would be possible, it's certainly viable to imagine the number of units there and I think in a form that I think would be compatible with the surrounding community and neighborhood. The one thing I wanted to mention is that I do understand that there, in recent conversation, that there may be some need to keep the existing fire station for a period of time for other uses, perhaps. And it strikes me that in this particular approach, in a way, the fire station could remain, and some portion of this notion could be developed even independent of the fire station disappearing, and then at some point at a later phase that could evolve. So it's just from this particular concept, it just happens to hold off that corner in a way that is convenient, but in any case, it's just a thought. So I will leave my presentation there, although I know Brooke, I believe, had a couple of comments to make as well, but I'll stay up here for questions and comments.
Take questions from the architect now, or do you want to?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm happy to say. Sure.
So I like the, first of all, I think that's an amazing amount of work in a very short period of time, and I appreciate that. I find that your mission is really intriguing for your company. And I appreciate you thinking about a phasing concept because we do have some pretty dramatic space needs for office space for the town. And I don't know if it would make sense, but in that phasing, because as I said last time, when the folks will need who occupy, if we do go forward with the temporary reuse, they're going to eventually need permanent space, and having office space just on this location might be a future home for them or other town functions. So I think I appreciate your work, and thank you. I don't have any questions.
I can come. I really like it. I saw you guys present last year at MMA.
Oh, great!
And I really liked your designs that you did on the Cape and in Rhode Island. I really appreciate that you kept it mixed use. I think it's the right thing for the property. I'm really encouraged that we could still fit 30 housing units because with two of the larger projects that we have in the works, we're 39 short of our SHI requirements. So if they were all rental, it's another potential way to get to that threshold. And I'm really glad that you mentioned the phasing, because that was something we were talking about earlier today. If we move some offices in there for a period of time, it lays out really, really well to build those 3 townhouse buildings after everything else is built out.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit concerned about having truly enough parking on the site, but I think it's workable. So maybe you lose a commercial unit.
Exactly.
Like
I think there's, I think that can be teased out as it evolves.
And you could restrict in all of the leases that every unit has one car.
Right.
It's on the bus route. It's on the sidewalks and bike paths.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like seeing the pictures. It's sort of what we're missing is people need to realize that we need to put density in the right places and not densify the countryside. We need to actually be willing to go 3 stories in certain areas and put housing in the right places. And so I'm very happy to see this sort of approach and be talking about it. It's the right direction, and it's the right place.
Great.
I like the conversation about missing middle. I really appreciate the work that went into this to do this in the time frame. I was very concerned that this would be a distraction. This is really appealing. I think this is the best this corner has looked as long as I've seen it. My only question, I really like in some of your other projects reflected as well, the integration of green space, street parking, like that feels like a streetscape you'd want to walk around. But I'm wondering, and I know this is very conceptual, are those roofs as they are they solar ready? Or is that something I would like to see in affordable housing projects and town projects, is even just a little bit of a mention of solar?
Absolutely. They certainly could be. That's, I think, and I would love to see more of that in our affordable work too, collectively. So.
And I also do think because I do think we have some very pressing needs with our some of our town offices. I like the phasing, the ability to phase as well, and be able to work with the sewer force is major. So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So cool.
8 or 9 of these arguably face the right direction as it's just sitting now.
And the flat roof as well.
Yeah, the flat roof could absolutely.
Yeah, flat would too.
Sure.
But yeah, so
I don't think the HDC is going to approve that flat roof.
Well, I think
Right. Well,
yeah.
so please take some of this with a grain of salt. 'Cause I get it.
well, you've got to, if you
just a
wanted to do that,
concept.
you'd have to go back into the file and find them because we actually did have
Yeah,
them.
I know.
And there was a lot more Victorian, with more character
Yeah.
than we approve now. If
Stop
you go
and
back
Shop
to
was
the
a flat
NHA,
roof.
it's kind of fun.
I forgot, and I got excited about a flat roof for all the potential. But
How many
never
square
know.
feet
Yeah.
total is there about?
Oh, now you're bending my noodle. I honestly can't recall it off.
I
could
just
do the math if
I did the math here, and then I added 10%. I got about 40,000.
Yeah,
Is it probably
seems
about right?
reasonable. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So if it's 40,000 and we're spending how much to build now? Yeah, you'll
I'd be-
die.
I'd
You'll
be-
die
I'd be
when you hear the
curious to know out
Nantucket.
here.
Yeah, when you hear the Nantucket number. How much are we spending, Tucker, per square foot now? 500.
You
Okay.
gotta be kidding me.
not if the town's building it.
That's
It's
astonishing.
700.
Yeah, 7 or 8. Yeah.
That's astonishing.
Right. Yeah, I got to 34, and then I added, figuring there's gonna, I added a little extra to be careful.
Right.
So I went to 40. So that's 20 million or 32 million, depending what time of day it is and who's bidding.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like right for the moment, but 30 is kind of a key number in terms of being in the sweet spot with respect to tax credits.
Right. And what percent of this is tax creditable?
It depends how we configured the apartments. Yeah.
But if you did them in the right, what's the highest? If you had 30 units
Well,
and you did them in the right proportion,
You could make all 30 could be eligible if you were restricting them at the appropriate level, but you may not want to have that lower restriction on everything.
Right. Gotcha.
Brooke?
I just wanted to, Brooke Moore, Vice Chair of Affordable Housing Trust. I just want to say thank you to the board for inviting the Affordable Housing Trust into this conversation and to present us the opportunity to participate in helping come up with a proposal that is so incredible. And as always, we advocate for housing with respect for other municipal needs for town resources. And so I'm delighted, this phasing thing sort of came up as we looked at the plan and went, oh, that's where the existing fire station is. So, I think that there's a real opportunity to meet the short-term needs for office space and get moving forward on the mixed use part of it in a quicker time frame. And I think I'm thrilled with the opportunity and grateful that the trust can be part of the team on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Rita?
I just wanted to know, Lydia, if you had any comments about, you had made a recommendation about moving two of the offices to sort of what your thoughts were.
Well, I'm glad that phasing's mentioned, but we need an overall municipal office space plan, because even if a couple of offices are somehow phased into this, I don't know that they would stay there permanently or not. We are trying to work on ending the remote scattering of offices and consolidating them into one place for efficiency and, more effective operational purposes. So we could potentially continue with the plan that we presented a couple of months ago with moving the couple of offices there and establishing some much needed meeting space. If the board is supportive of that, we do have funding, if it goes through the capital budget at the town meeting, to potentially do some or all of that. My concern, I guess, would be, and this just probably needs to be planned out, how and when would we then move them to where? And how and when will this be developed? It's clear to me we need we need a project manager for something like this. I was a little bit surprised to see a commercial use in here, because in my mind, when we initially talked about it, this was housing only. So if there's additional retail and other commercial uses, what is the purpose of that? Is that to get revenue to fund things? So just that might have come up, but I didn't really hear that when the board was talking about it before. So there's obviously a lot of work to be done here, but I appreciate what the board had said early on, that housing is a main part, if not the main part of the strategic plan, and we should be looking at that first. And if this property can be maximized for that purpose in a way that furthers our goal, then let's get at it. But I guess these couple of offices that we talked about are in desperate need of moving to appropriate office space locations, but I don't want to be in a position where, then where are they going to go when the housing moves in? So, but perhaps it's all just part of a bigger plan that everybody needs to get in on, and it needs to be approved.
If I may, I think we should move forward with your recommendation for the time being. And I would personally like to continue to see this plan developed. And I think that we need to put it on our radar. Maybe it's right after town meeting to really, consider digging into municipal offices again and what our long-term planning is, because it takes so long to get anything built. We've got to figure out our 3, 5, and 10 year plan for town office needs.
I agree, Dawn. Originally, when this first brought up, I couldn't see housing here, even though I know it's our strategic plan, but I was willing to go with it. But now, like you said, Matt, the visual really helps. It helps me. I feel more comfortable with it, whether it's mixed use or all housing. So I do appreciate the work that everybody's done. It's helpful for me. I agree with you, Don. I think we need to have a bigger municipal use facilities plan. We have the facilities deputy director now who can kind of lead some of that charge and research. And so I agree. We need the bigger picture, but I also would like to see, I believe it's option 7 to move forward if that's the recommendation of our town administration. Rita?
I would like to see this fleshed out more as well. Again, I think this is a great start. But I still definitely agree with the vote that we took before to look at the two, Board of Health and Natural Resources coming together. The more I thought about it afterwards as well, is I do feel that that really is working towards our environmental leadership and our water quality goals. Those two departments need to be together, I think, in achieving some of our other goals as well. So I think putting that out there as the initial short-term priority while fleshing this out, I think would be ideal.
If I could jump in on that, I was in a meeting on Monday. It was a transportation meeting, but had a lot of directors of departments there, and we were done with 22 minutes to spare. So we just sat in there and just started talking about 50 to 100 year utility kind of really big plan. Like that doesn't, just because we were in the same room, some really good ideas came out. So like having 2 water quality department specific departments in the same building, good things happen. So I agree with you. Being in the same building does help. And whatever else comes up, coastal resiliency, supervisor or project lead. Did you want to make a motion?
Do you want to make a motion? Does anybody else want to
There's
comment?
already a motion that was approved by the board to go ahead with the temporary relocation at your last minute when we talked about this before.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you need another vote.
Okay. Did you feel that?
It's in the minutes that were part of the packet.
So make sure that she's feels like you have that directive.
It was highlighted. Erica highlighted them. So.
But do we need to make a motion
But
to pursue
Yeah.
taking this plan to
Yeah.
the next
So
step.
I'd make a motion that we pursue action to take this plan to the next level.
Is
And
there
I would
fun-
also like to, whatever that is, I'd also like to see the temporary use planning done in a way that would be compatible with the phasing of this project too. So that's my motion. If it's kind of
I'll
convoluted.
second that. Would it be funded through the trust fund? Doing further
Sure.
planning?
Yeah, I'd say yes.
Just figure we should ask where the money's coming from.
Well, I think that we would obviously have to vote on it, but I think if it relates to housing, it's definitely within our purview to help fund that process. When it
Right.
relates to municipal offices, I would say probably
No, not the office part. I mean,
yeah.
furthering the
So
housing
just
plan.
this reuse of the space.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I mean, we would certainly be happy to entertain that.
Matt,
Yeah, that's
do you have something? Okay.
It does seem like as part of furthering this, though, we do need to look at the municipal office plan as part of it.
Yeah, but
That's another agenda
That's
item.
another gorilla.
Yeah,
But I think if we do look at this, though, I think we could put preliminary numbers. It's so many square feet. It's so many units. What would it, what would the actual cost be? How would it be done? That part of it is fairly simple, and then you can use that to compare to other options that we're thinking about, and you start to have a basis of comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we just wanted to get some initial reaction, and if the board would like us to pursue it further, particularly keeping an eye on the phasing possibility of it, we're happy to come back with more details and numbers.
Any more discussion on Jim's motion?
I just make a comment, and this is exactly the kind of dynamic interaction, collegial activity that I was hoping for when the Affordable Housing Trust Fund concept came forward, and we've seen it. This is a great example of it. So I want to thank them for your leadership.
Any more discussion on the motion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Any other comments? Housing? Anybody from the public wants to give their 2 cents?
I think the conversation's great. I just wanted to ask kind of 2 questions. One, I know there's a bunch of great trees, so I'd hope going forward, not to say that they'd stay on the property, that we could move them elsewhere. They're just phenomenal trees. Maybe keep them there or move them around. And then I was just wondering if the architect could talk a little bit about why not maintaining the current fire station, not reusing it. If we could talk about that a little bit, because I think it is important. I worked as a stonemason for 6 years. Bricks, they last forever.
That's an excellent question, and certainly something I think we could look at in the context of housing there. For the purpose of this study, we were assuming that it was disappearing, but I think if it were to move forward, that would certainly be part of the conversation, because there's a lot of value built into that, whether it's housing or office space.
Excuse me. I'm losing when I came back to the island some 20 years ago, one of the first things I noticed then, an enormous number of the population, to my eyes, severely mobility impaired. And I was at that point working with the Disabilities Commission. And when I heard this gentleman say walk-ups, I kept thinking, there's going to be a whole bunch more families with little kids growing up who can't keep grandma in the house, and so on and so forth, if they're walk-ups. So if there's some way to change the necessity of having walk-ups that our old people, and with knees like mine now, can't handle, I think we should think seriously about it, because our people are older and they do have bad knees.
Thank you, Phil.
There are 3 in this design. Most of the units are 1 bedroom. So it would be for 1 or 2 people. But 3 in the design are completely accessible, first floor units.
On first floor.
And then I would imagine the townhouses could probably think towards having a first floor bedroom in the design, or some way for that to work. It's a good comment.
Thank you, Don. Anything else on this? Nice work, everyone. On to select board reports, comments. Matt, you got anything? Nothing?
Nope. Don't get near me. I've been sick for a week.
Oh, we did go to the Cape Cod Selectmen and Council meeting on Friday. Libby, Brian, and I did to talk about the short-term rental tax. And I know you had jotted down some thoughts.
I jotted down a few things. Yeah, there's some issues among the towns about the water protection fund, and they're all in it automatically, and they would have to opt out. So there was some talk about some towns that are already considering an opt out, and other towns who are against an opt out. There is, just in no particular order, there is a component of the legislation that allows for local option regulations about housing, inspectional program, and things of that nature. There's a meeting about that sometime soon in Central Mass, I think, or somewhere around there. So it's a meeting sponsored, I believe, by the City Solicitors Association or the Town Council Association, whatever they are actually called. And it sounds as though our town council will be there, so he can report back to us on that. There was some discussion about towns that are looking at special legislation that would allow them to dedicate a portion of the additional revenue that would come from short-term rentals to specific purposes. Some were talking about affordable housing, some were talking about infrastructure. We talked amongst ourselves about either of those things, perhaps dedicated funding source for the RTA year-round service. It would take special legislation to do that, but we talked amongst ourselves about maybe we see how much we're talking about after a year or so, and then we consider that. There were some good arguments made by different members of the same board in one particular town as to being in the water protection fund and not being in the fund. And on the one hand, there was a feeling that whatever a town puts into it, it should potentially be able to get that back. And there was another feeling that this is a regional issue, and there are some towns that are further ahead than others. And we're one big economic area, so that should not be a factor. The clean water benefits everybody equally. So that rang a chord with me.
There were some very
frankly
vocal, particularly a councilman from Barnstable, who Barnstable has more sewer than most of the towns and is one of the biggest. So it will be putting a lot of funds in, and that he was very concerned about that. It being equitable, where another select person spoke very strongly about that all of the Cape towns are connected to each other, and it's a Cape-wide problem, and including the islands.
Yeah, I think we should not take ourselves out of thinking we're not part of that. So anyway, it was just a meeting. There were no decisions made, and our kind of general thought was we should see how our revenue comes in and determine at a later time whether the trust is for us. I think we have some additional work to do anyway, analysis on whether it makes sense in any case. So, but it was a good meeting. We were glad to be there and glad to be represented. So.
It's nice when they have it in Hyannis, so it's easy for us to get there.
I just had some comments. There was the Vineyard Wind presentation on Monday, and it was the first time a lot of what I sort of have been involved with these Section 106, which has to do with Nantucket being a National Historic Landmark. So the impacts on the views, and then how some of the project can be tweaked to mitigate the impacts of the views. So this was the first time where we heard a little more diversity of opinion and feedback. I think overall it was positive. And there was a little more conversation around sort of localized environmental impact and concern from the fishermen. But I know that this is a project Vineyard Wind has been working with the fishermen out of New Bedford for over a year. And they've been working on some of the localized environmental impacts over a year as well. So it's great to have the discussion out and happening within our community. But it has been a long ongoing process. And it's also something in terms of our role and how we work with the Vineyard Wind project being essentially in our backyard. I think we're going to be talking about more on a future meeting, probably next week. So more to come, and it will be on NCTV shortly, so anyone can watch.
Anything else? Okay, motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Thank you.